In this episode, I'm going to talk about the threshold levels in Google's algorithm. I'm going to talk about Google slaps and how to recover from a penalty or a Google slap, and I'm also going to talk about the new Badly Done SEO, which is basically the incorrect way to do SEO currently, given the appearance of Panda, Penguin, and Hummingbird and other updates of Google's. Okay, so what exactly is are thresholds in Google's algorithm? Basically, you can think of the Google algorithm as having hundreds or maybe thousands of different signals that these are different variables, and you can think of them as dials on a board that Google plays with, and for each from time to time they can turn it up or they can turn down the dial individually on each of these signals. And they can also set them differently for different niches and for different keywords. And so they would have it differently for like popular niches, like payday loans, which is like a big niche, and they would have it set differently for smaller niches. And that's how you should think about it. So Google has these thousands of variables and these small dials that they can control and tweak. And they really turn these dials slowly, and they wouldn't, and a lot of the times they don't sort of do it internet-wide. They just do it in a particular data center or a particular location and see how things are matching up, whether the search results are are coming up consistently, and there's no like spam filling up the search results. And of course they do it in-house also. So that's how they sort of release the algorithm. And when a new algorithm comes out, you see things shuffling around the net and the search results shuffling, that's Google is playing around with the dials, or they've inserted a few new dials into the equation. Now, Panda and Penguin are basically just a set of similar dials that Google plays with. So the dials are sort of across the Penguin algorithm is one set of dials that are sort of similar, and Panda has a separate set of dials that are similar. So Penguin, by similar I mean Penguin would have like a lot of dials would be related to the anchor text link or the on-page keyword stuffing and things like that. Now, if your site has too many unnatural signals and that are not sort of matching with other sites and are breaking the threshold levels that are set in these dials, if you exceed one or two of these signals, you probably won't get flagged off. But if your site starts crossing these levels in large numbers, so for example, if Google has 100 threshold levels, different dials, and just one or two, if your site it doesn't conform to one or two signals and breaks a threshold, you're not going to get a penalty. In all chances, you're not going to get a Google slap or a penalty. You're not going to get detected. But if the numbers keep increasing, that's when things start getting caught in the Google filter, and that's when you get a Google slap. And you could get an algorithmic penalty if an algorithm catches it, or a manual penalty if your site goes into a review and somebody sitting somewhere in Google's team does a manual review and flags your site, then you get a notice in Webmaster saying your site, you've been hit by Google and you've been de-indexed. Now, this has given rise to the birth of negative SEO. Essentially what this allows anyone to do is build low quality links towards their competitor's site using readily available tools. That's something not very desirable, but it is possible. It is possible to use some of the tools out there. I'm not going to name them right now, to build a bunch of a whole like farm of links out to your competitor and get them hit, basically get them penalized. That's not a good sign, but it is possible. Negative SEO is a reality, and there are some shady SEO companies doing that. It's not ethical, and I'd advise you never to do it. It's just not right, because you should put yourself in the other person's boot also. It's not something that you should be doing. Okay, so we talked a little bit about algorithmic versus manual penalties and the Webmaster Tools notice. An algorithmic penalty is basically when you get detected by Google's algorithm like Penguin or Panda, and your site starts falling off the charts. Your site could fall off by a few ranks, it could fall off by a few pages, or it could get de-indexed entirely. That's entirely possible with an algorithmic penalty. A manual penalty is when somebody looks at your site, somebody working at Google in their spam team looks at your site and decides that you've been basically trying to game them and your site is not of much value. And so they send you a notice in your webmaster tools, and that notice tells you that you've been hit. With a manual penalty, you basically get de-indexed from Google, and there are various types of manual penalties also. Now, there are ways to get out of both these penalties, and both are a manual penalty would require you to submit a reconsideration request to the Google Web Spam team so they can come back and relook at your site, and then you're at their mercy. Versus an algorithmic penalty, which is basically you need to fix things on your site or your backlink profile by deleting your backlinks or modifying anchor text and diluting them and doing various sorts of things like that, and wait for the next algorithmic refresh or the data refresh to happen. So when Google comes back and does the entire data refresh, it picks up the new signals and it gets you out. Now, generally it's not easy to get out of either of these penalties, and very, very few people, maybe less than 5%, actually get out of it. Google did come out with something called a disavow tool, basically, and what that is you can go in there and you can sort of dilute your backlink profile and remove all the bad links that are pointing in, sort of get them discounted by the algorithm. So you go out there and you find if you have 1,000 bad backlinks and you've decided to and these are causing a damage to your site, you go to the disavow tool, you take these URLs and you plug it in there and you submit it to Google, and within time they will start discounting all these links. So they will remove any link juice. They'll no follow the links to your site from those pages. By no following it, you won't get any negative link juice now anymore flowing into your site, which was happening before with the Penguin algorithm and the Panda algorithm. You can have negative link juice coming into your sites. You can have bad links having an effect. So with the disavow tool, you sort of negate that. And there's a lot of talk whether that works or not, or whether it was just a crowdsourced move by Google to identify all the bad links that are there on the internet because they couldn't do it themselves. So they sort of crowdsourced it by having people submit it, and so and if many people would submit the same page as having as a poor content page or a bad link, they would start flagging that particular page as a poor page and sort of de-index that page. So there's a lot of question on whether this was a genuine way to help people who are doing SEO by Google, or it was just a clever move for Google to use the power of the crowd to identify bad links and bad pages because they couldn't handle the amount of web spam that's spreading around on the web. Very less than even 5% people recover from a penalty. I've not seen more. I think that's about the ratio people talk about online, maybe 10%. It's hard to recover from a penalty. Of course, there are people out there who say and claim that they've figured out how to recover, but it still is very hard. Okay, so what really is bad SEO nowadays? You need to ask yourself a question: what looks unnatural in link building? Things like overstuffed anchor link profiles, keyword stuffing in content and in your URL, exact match domains, partial match domains, EMDs and PMDs. But that, like domains that have your money keyword in it, like bestlawyermumbai.com, or things like weddingphotographerchicago.com, domains like that. There was an exact EMD update which hit those kind of sites, and did wipe out a lot of sites that were using EMDs to rank. Because earlier it was easy to rank sites which had the money keyword in the domain name itself. So Google went out and hit those sites also with the EMD and the PMD, the partial match update. Other kind of bad links are like too many thin links, if you've got way too many thin links, like if you've got 50,000 forum profile links, you decided to run Xroomer, which is a tool to build 50,000 forum profile links to your site. That's a thin link. It's a horrible link. Site-wide links also can hurt you if they're on a footer. So if there's a site with 10,000 pages and you've got your money anchor on the footer across all those 10,000 pages, it could hurt you. If you've got bad links, if you've got links pointing to your site in bad clusters, like pirated sites or sites with malware or spawned sites, those links can hurt you. Low link relevancy, if you've got too many links coming from non-relevant sites. So if you're a photographer, if you've got too many links coming from like non-related sites from other niches, like from say fishing or lawyer or from a technology site, and you're a photographer, they're non-relevant links, right? Why would anyone link to you from those sites? If you've got a few of them, that's fine. But if you cross a certain factor, that's bad. So linked relevancy is important. Your bad content on your page and your site. If your site has thin content, if it's got spun content, bad grammar, garbled content, and doesn't make sense, Google is getting more and more clever in answering, in recognizing that. So that's unnatural. Lack of social signals. If your site doesn't have any sort of social signals on it, that's not a good sign. If your site is slow, that's a huge ranking factor right now also. If you are on a bad host and your site is slow to respond, Google doesn't want to send people to your site if they've got to wait too long for it to load. If you don't update your site very often, that's also unnatural. So Google wants you to come back and keep updating your sites. If you've got a high bounce rate, by bounce rate I mean people come to your site, visit your site, and they hit the back button and they don't go back to Google search for that particular keyword. So bounce rate, I'll just talk a little bit about bounce rate right now. Bounce rate is basically when someone performs a search for your keyword, they find your site ranking, they click on it, they come to your site, and they immediately hit the back button and go back to Google to look for the next site. That's a bounce rate. If your bounce rate is more than about 50-60%, that's bad. Google, you need to keep it controlled and keep it under that. Too many people come to your site and they leave like within 10 seconds. That's bad. That's horrible, because it's telling Google that they didn't find what they were looking for on your site. So once you rank your site, you need to, in order to keep it ranking, you need to have a low bounce rate. You need to get user termination, in the sense a person searches for your keyword, comes to your site, and then they don't go back to Google or they close their browser. That means they've terminated their search. They've found what they're looking for on your site, and they're not going back to Google. That's a good signal. So you need to make sure you don't have a high bounce rate. Then a poor user experience, of course, would be something like not having proper search navigation and things like that on your site. Having too many ads on your site, having thin content, that's all bad user experience. Low search termination, I just talked about, that was like your bounce rate itself. And duplicate content is something you shouldn't be having on your site, even if you have the same service being performed in different cities. So if you're in Chicago, LA, and another city, and if you have the same content with just the city name changed across your sites, that's bad. That's duplicate content or within your site. And of course, you can't copy content from other sites also. That's also bad. Duplicate images from other sites, there is a way for Google now, and they're doing this actively. They can detect if you just do a search on images.google.com and you pull out images from there and you punch them and you put them onto your site, that's not going to help you anymore. Google is going to detect that these images are taken from other sites from the net, and that's going to hurt your rankings. You can use about 10% of images from other sites, but your images got to be at least 90% unique. And I'll talk about how to, in my later courses, how to modify images and make them unique on your site. Having similar pages I just spoke about is also bad, and there are a ton of other ranking factors that are unnatural, and that's the wrong way to do SEO nowadays. Coming up next is in episode 4, We'll talk about why you need to be careful with SEO now, what links not to build or buy from someone, and we'll talk about the other animals and the algorithm updates.